Welcome to this unique episode of Cast It to the King. My name is Joshua Mickle, and as you can see, we're not in our typical house studio area. We're just going for a little stroll, get my steps in here at my job, and I just want to take a little moment just to talk about what's been happening and also what's been going on with those Tennessee Titans right now. And so, to start off, right at the gate, Tennessee answered the bell in a big way versus the Los Angeles Chargers, and they really put a whooping on them defensively, and Tannehill answered the bell offensively. There's nothing more you can say about this Titans squad outside of they are the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde type of team. They suck when they suck, and they look like one of the worst teams in the NFL. They're mediocre sometimes. And then they're like on Sunday where they win when they're not supposed to win. So, typical Tennessee. It's the same ever since I've been a fan. They always grind it out versus the teams they're not supposed to win, and it just shocks people. And the question is always, how did this team lose to the Titans? Well, Derrick Henry did really well in terms of the offensive play calling. It was sound, using Derrick Henry as a decoy and as a runner, utilizing Tajay Spears as running back number 2, and then also Tannehill after what was a horrific first quarter of play. A horrific first quarter of play. That was like a continuation of the Saints game last week. Man, when he took that sack, instead of rolling out of the pocket or throwing the ball away, those boos started to come in from the crowd. And those boos, well deserved. Tannehill needs to step it up. And then, shortly after that, before all that though, with Peter Skoronski out with an injury, probably out for a few weeks with the injury he has, Xavier Newman got the start. And that dude was horrendous. So bad that he didn't last a quarter and a half before Vrabel said, okay, enough with you. Get your rear end back on the bench and put in Dylan Radins. I think he is about 7 months removed. 7 months or 9 months. I can't remember how many months it's been since he tore his ACL against the Chargers last year in Week 15 in LA. And so, fast recovery from the ACL, which was one of the big surprise headliners for the Titans coming into the training camp this year. Going into the season this year, that he was on the active roster instead of PUP. And so, with Dylan Radins, after Xavier Newman got benched, Dylan was placed in at left guard. And then it seems like our O-line after that, it clicked. Something clicked. Whatever it was, it just clicked. And then that's when our offense really did explode. And Tannehill, almost a complete perfect game. If not for that first quarter, his grade would have been A+. If not for that first quarter, his grade would be an A+ for the entire game. And once again, it seems like we have solved our issues at kicker with Nick Folk not missing his kicks and making his kicks like he should, unlike other previous kickers in the past. So far, he's perfect on the year. So we'll see how long that stretches out to be. Our defense, there's nothing more you can say. Even with Amani Hooker at safety out, insert Elijah Molding. With Christian Fulton out, insert Roger McCray from the slot and over to the outside. He played the outside when he was at Auburn, dominated. What happens when he's on the outside versus the Saints and then now against the Chargers? Even though he's an undersized corner, he's my height. I think he's 5'10", I believe. Dominated for what he did over at the corner slot. And so, going forward with the defense, they held this Chargers team that scored over 30 points against the Dolphins in Week 1 and just held them to 24 points through 4 quarters And even in the overtime period, they didn't give up points. They forced a 3-and-out from the Chargers. And that set up what was a very, very, sudden rain that awkwardly came in. And the Titans kick a game-winning field goal on 3rd down just to get the heck out of there, to make sure it didn't rain too much for the kicking team. And so the MVPs of the game, I would say, you could certainly put it up there. Tim Kelly, the offensive coordinator. Ryan Tannehill, who had a breakout game and finally got over the slump. Mike Vrabel for his overall coaching. I mean, it's an overall team good win effort. And if you want to try to compete this year, as they think they can, with the Titans, if they think they can compete, they need to stack up these wins. Because these Nets games heading into the bye week are going to be against pivotal opponents. Pivotal AFC opponents. And starting next week, they have Cleveland. They got Cleveland going into Cleveland. And Cleveland just lost their stud running back in Nick Chubb. And Deshaun Watson still looks iffy back there in the pocket. And Deshaun Watson still looks trigger happy. So if you're this Titans defense, you are licking your chops right now. You are licking your chops, ready to get after this Browns offense. And I believe Amari Cooper, the wide receiver, may be out as well for the next game. Then the next game after that, after Cleveland, Tennessee hosts the boogeyman known as the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow re-aggravated his calf injury from training camp. He re-aggravated that calf injury. And so now, if you win against Cleveland and you're facing a sliding, let's say, for example, Cincinnati, God forbid, they lose their next game, they're 0-3. You go into game 4 and you have a reeling Cincinnati Bengals team versus now a 2 straight win Tennessee Titans team who was riding hot off of 2 straight wins. That's a game to be had by Tennessee. That's a game to be had by the Titans. And then you're looking at 3-1 right there, which I would have never expected to start out the year. I thought we would start out the season 2-4 with 4 losses. And then after that, you go on the road to Indianapolis to face off AR5 Anthony Richardson and the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson just got he's now in the concussion protocol. So he's now banged up. And so that's another game ripe to be had and probably may go Tennessee's way early on this year. The second matchup, we'll see how that goes out. And then you got the game in London versus the Ravens. The Ravens are looking good this year, but we will see how well they will last up until the London game. If Tennessee can go, if they can win these next few games going into the bye week at 5-1, at minimum 4-2. If they go into the bye week at minimum 4-2 or 3-3, the schedule is going to be so much of a cakewalk versus rookies, second-year players, or average quarterbacks in terms of quarterback play for the particular teams going forward after the bye week. So the season is ripe to be had if Tennessee can keep this momentum up. And that's the key. This offense for the Titans. They got to keep scoring more than 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 points a game. They got to not score those amount of points a game. They got to score 20, 21, 23, 24, 27, 28. Maybe get our first 30 burger in over 620 plus days. It has not been since since January 2nd of the 2021-2022 season where we scored over 30 points. And that was against the Miami Dolphins, and the score was, I believe it was 33-3. We scored 30 points or so against the Miami Dolphins. That was the last time we scored over 30 points. This win against the Chargers, we scored 27 points. That matches last year's season high at 27 versus the Green Bay Packers. When was the last time we scored 28 points? I have no idea. It's probably been longer. It's probably longer than the 30 burger, in all honesty. And that's another thing without scoring points on offense. Tim Kelly, I believe he can still dial up the plays that are needed for this offense to win. I think he's got the combination down with Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears as our 1-2 punch. I believe he has the right concepts of getting our wide receivers open. I believe Tannehill missed another touchdown pass to, looking at the coach's film, I think Ryan Tannehill missed an open route to DeAndre Hopkins for a touchdown versus the Chargers this past week. And so now, going forward after one game, Tannehill has to build off this one game. He's got to build off of it. He's got to keep doing better. He can't be turning the football over. And he's got to be scoring more, and he's got to be scoring touchdowns on the board. We got to keep scoring touchdowns on the board. We cannot be selling for field goals. We can't be selling for touchdowns. I know, we want touchdowns. We can't be selling for field goals. We can't be selling for field goals. And we got to score more than 17 points a game in order to win the NFL. And if you ever want to have a slimmer of hope of contending, as the Titans want to try to do this year, and Ryan Tannehill is playing for a new contract for another team for 2024, because we are not bringing him back after this season. Because the only reason he is with us still, I will remind you, the only reason Ryan Tannehill is still with us is because we are paying that man $36 million in the cap. He is a $36 million cap hit. If he was not that expensive of a cap hit, he would have been gone 2 years ago after that Cincinnati Bengals game or after last year. But they set it up to where they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have their cake and eat it too with Malik Willis. 2 years ago we drafted him in the third round. Or Will Levis, who we drafted last year, this previous draft, in the second round. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to try and contend this year, while also having an eye in the future saying, hey, after 2023, we're rolling with one of these guys and trying to figure out who is our franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. And so that's what they're going to try to figure out. One last thing I will say about the Chargers is they just cannot get over their Charger curse of having so much talent around them and finding a way to blow leads. It's followed them since the San Diego days, and it's now doing the same thing over and over again with LA, with their stint in LA as with the LA Chargers. So Brandon Staley, I would not be shocked if he is the first head coach to go out. That's the first head coach fired, which will be a very, very interesting situation where their new offensive coordinator may just in fact become the new head coach of the LA Chargers, who just popped over from Dallas. And by the way, Dallas, without their offensive coordinator from the past few years, I can't think of his name right now on this walk, but Mike McCarthy calling plays for Dallas Cowboys. They have not lost a step. In fact, they seem like they gained a step. Now, for you Cowboy fans out there, I will say this to you. For you and all the other media pundits that say Dallas is going to win the Super Bowl, look at how dominant they win. They scored 70 points against 10 touchdowns. I would just say to you, congratulations on your 2-0 start. Congratulations on beating up on the New York Mets and the New York Yankees of this year. Congratulations on beating up sorry you-know-what New York franchises and feeling good about it. Because those teams, with the Giants and the Jets, the Giants should have lost to the Cardinals. They should have lost to the Cardinals, but the Cardinals, they want to preserve their tank, and they fulfilled their tank, and they're still winless on the year to get the first overall pick this year. The Jets, they just lost Aaron Rodgers. So, similar situations for the Mets and Yankees. You just essentially beat the equivalent of the Mets and Yankees of this year's NFL squad and the New York Giants and Jets. So congratulations, Cowboys. You beat the sorry you-know-what teams of New York, both of them back-to-back. Let's see how you do against Philadelphia. Let's see how you do against the Commanders, who are, I will give a shout-out and props to Rocky through 2 games. Rocky Moores, if you're watching this, Rocky, your offense looks really, really good with Eric Bieniemy as your offensive coordinator. They look really, really good. That game should have been tied had it not been for the 2-point conversion fail and what was a controversial, was it or was it not a pass interference call? I mean, that should have been called on the Commanders for that 2-point conversion. Let's see you Cowboys. Let's see how you do against them. Let's see how you do against the other stack competition. Oh yeah, I think you're playing San Francisco this year again. So get ready for that if that's the case. If you're playing San Francisco this year or not. So you still got to contend with the likes of Philadelphia, San Francisco, and your division, Washington. You got New York one more time. So we'll see if you can sweep them or if they steal one more game from you in Dallas this time, like the old days, where Eli would just roll up in there at the new Cowboys Stadium and find a way to steal wins from you in front of your home crowd. So Dallas, I hope you sleep well tonight because you're 2-0, yeah, but I'll say like I said last year versus when the Titans went 7-3 to start out the year. I said we were the most fraudulent 7-3 team in the NFL. We lost in that 7 and then at 7-10. Dallas is the most fraudulent 2-0 team in the NFL right now. They are the most fraudulent team, 2-0 team in the NFL right now, just based on who they're playing against and all the hype that's going into those 2 opponents that you smacked to death. Which you should have smacked to death, but you gotta realize who those teams are. If you're beating up on, say, if you did that against Philadelphia and 49ers back-to-back, then the hype will be more substantial and it'll be more credible per se if you were to beat heavy hitters like that back-to-back games to start out the year. But you beat the Giants and the Jets. Come on. Giants and Daniel Jones and that contract's looking like to be a big bust so far. And Aaron Rodgers is done with the Jets this year. May come back next year, we'll see. If you believe the rumor out there, if the Jets were to make the playoffs this year with Zach Wilson or whoever's the quarterback in ultimately, if that happens to be the case, this doctor that repaired Aaron Rodgers' Achilles said that he could possibly be available in January. Which, if that is the case, modern day medicine, even if he doesn't come back in January, but overall with modern day medicine, has come such a long way with this technology that we have today. And if Aaron Rodgers comes back this year somehow, if we see on social media, he's running, he's throwing in January or February for an injury. At least in basketball, if you suffer this injury, you're out for at least a good year and a half, or 2 years, like Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson previously. And so, if Aaron Rodgers can come back, if he's physically 100, 80, 90% in January and February next year, then oh my God, yeah, he's definitely coming back for the Jets, and he's going to have a whole offseason to get even stronger and healthier with that leg of his. There's another piece of news that popped up recently in the world of entertainment, that for Last of Us Season 2, just to get a broad understanding for Last of Us is a video game property that got that PlayStation production or PlayStation Studios over at Sony developed a TV show with that property and others. And they've developed movies in the past. And so HBO helped distribute The Last of Us Season 1. It's confirmed they're going to be doing Season 2. No surprise. Season 1, like the first game, is a masterpiece success, and it's awesome. Season 2 will be taking elements of the Game 2 storyline, Part 2 storyline. So, going into, before the recent news that came out, remember that the developer of the game, Neil Druckmann, if you are to believe his words, who was also one of the executive producers on the live action TV show, he said that Season 2 is going to be extremely different than what the actual game turned out to be for Part 2. Now, if you played the game and know the story, you know a particular main character. You know what? It's a video game. It's out there. You can search it up. Joel is dead in the first few minutes of the new Last of Us game, it seems like. He is dead by this random character that stumbles onto this game called Abby. Now, in 2020, when the game's released, there's a girl that motion captioned her, and I'm not dissing on the actress that played the role of Abby and voiced it. I'm just saying, why did you need to put man arms on that girl? You're trying to make a game that's realistic, like ultra realistic. There's no woman on this earth, unless you are a UFC fighter or a power lifter. No normal girl has those arms that they computer generated, that they CGI'd on that player's arms. And then they make you play as the character Abby. The story for Part 2 in the video game will leave you disgusted and hating Abby. Now, they show you her point of view, and they try and make you feel sympathetic towards the character. But it never feels that way. The character of Abby in The Last of Us Part 2 just makes you sick of her, feels disgusted with her, and you wish she would die. You wish you could just fall off a cliff with her when you're playing her. You will like one of those parasite zombies kill her. For better or for worse, you would just let her, the character so disliked in the game community for what she did to Joel and how Joel went out for the story, that most folks would rather see her dead. Much rather see her dead. And the way that story ended, that never happened. She still lives, and what was some sort of a cliffhanger at the end of that long story. So we'll see going forward. Now, when talking about for Season 2 for The Last of Us, we need to take those comments into consideration. Can one hope or wonder, or just wonder, just shrug, shoulder shrugging, one can wonder, or one has to wonder, with the reception the second game had, could they be changing up the story just a little bit to where Joel doesn't go out the way he does, or Joel is still in the story, but insert Abby as one of your antagonists? Because I have a hard time believing that you cast someone like Pedro Pascal, who was in The Mandalorian, who's now in The Last of Us, who is a hot ticket actor, being hired for projects left and right, seems like, and they just kill him off like that. I find that hard to believe. So it will be interesting how Season 2 is approached. One of the actresses that has been floated out there to play Abby is Florence Pugh. Which, by the way, the whole thing, if I didn't say earlier, I'm forgetting because of this walk. They have casted the role of Abby in The Last of Us Season 2 for HBO and PlayStation and Sony. One of the actresses that has been rumored to be playing Abby is Florence Pugh. Now, if you don't know what that name is, you will recognize her from Marvel Studios' Black Widow and Hawkeye. She is Natasha Romanoff's sister. Black Widow's sister. That's who she is. And she played that role in Black Widow. And she played that role in the Hawkeye TV series on Disney+. If she is cast as Abby, I would not be so opposed to that. I mean, that if someone like her is casted, that you know the character of Abby, at least physically, is not going to be exactly from the game. And if that's the case, thank the Lord. Have some sort of semblance of realism in that. Now she'll probably buff up, but not to the point where you have like man arms and abs and whatnot on for a girl's body. Like, that's just unrealistic, and that's just not feasible. And so for her to be one of those rumored actresses, now the reason they say it is cast, but they can't reveal the name. Why, you ask? We're still in the middle of a screen actor strike and a writer strike in Hollywood. We are still on that strike. No movies are being made. No castings have been made. Or at least, publicly at least. No castings have been made. And I guess in this situation, or in any situation, you can say, yes, we've cast, like, say, for example, Marvel Studios can come out tomorrow and say, we have casted our members for the Fantastic Four. Great, who are they? We can't say because of the whole actor strike that's going on right now. Now I guess you can say that and not reveal the name technically. That's a really interesting way of doing. Then why all this silence with movie news then? With entertainment news, if you can say as a studio, like, hey, we've got this project coming up, and this particular character for the project has been cast. If that's all you can say, then at least it's something. Don't give us nothing. So if that's the case with PlayStation, where they just announced that, hey, this character's been cast, and we unfortunately can't reveal the name of the actress yet because of the ongoing strikes that's going on. We hope the strikes resolve soon. If that's the case, PlayStation did a good job with revealing the news. So, but there is one particular YouTuber, I will say, who I actually, because of this video of how I'm recording it, I got this inspiration from him with John Campia, and the whole podcast was like, this whole Casted to the King podcast was actually influenced by him, like my viewership of him, of how he reports news and whatnot, and how he films it. And I just said, hey, why don't I just do that with sports, movies, and entertainment? He had the opinion the other day where he said that Abby is the most important character of the whole Last of Us franchise. Now for him, for his background, for what he reviewed with the Last of Us playthrough story mode game, he says it's the best. He says it's one of the best story arcs, one of the best video game stories one can ever tell. I would respectfully disagree on that, because of the fact that you spent the first game developing a story heavily tied to Joel, and then you introduce this character. Oh shoot, I'm blanking on the name. Ellie. You introduce Ellie. Joel and Ellie. Like, going through like the apocalyptic times of the world. What's like after this virus broke out. The story is about, the story you start out is with Joel and Ellie. Joel being the main key figure, and Ellie being the one that you play off of between the interactions between Joel and Ellie. And then when Abby is just abruptly introduced into the second game, what's a good comparison? A good comparison, I would say, that, I'm trying to think one off the top of my head. A good comparison I would have with this situation is if, say, for example, say for example, oh yeah, the recent, when they announced the new Spider-Man game with Miles Morales in 2020, we were just 2 years removed of the first ever Insomniac Spider-Man AAA game on PlayStation 4, which they did a fantastic job compared to what Activision had done to the property of video game and just disrespected it. And then Insomniac comes in and says, hey, we just had this game come out recently from Rockstar, from a different studio called Arkham Knight. 3 games based off, like 4 games technically, but 3 of them from Rockstar based on the Batman. So let's draw heavy influence from that, since everyone loves that game, Marvel fans and DC fans alike. And so when they announced initially the sequel to the Spider-Man game in PlayStation 4 was going to be called Spider-Man Miles Morales, a lot of fans, including me, started to think, wait, where's Peter? Where's Peter Parker? Is he written off? Is he killed off? Like, immediately those questions started to raise up. And had that been true, of Peter Parker being killed off, Spider-Man Miles Morales would have been one of the most hated games ever in the video game industry. But ultimately that was clarified by Insomniac and PlayStation representative said, no, this is not us writing off Peter Parker. This is not us killing him off. This is just us giving Miles Morales his own spin-off game. And they actually drew a comparison to another PlayStation property with Uncharted. They have 4 games, and I believe they have 1 spin-off or 2. I don't know how many spin-offs they had. But they drew a kin to those games and for the Uncharted franchise and said, think of it as the Uncharted spin-off where you're still in this world, but you're seeing the story from a different perspective with a different character that you know and love. And so most fans like me are like, okay, that is great. We still have to wait another, what is it now? The game's coming out next month with the sequel, Spider-Man 2. We had to wait 5 years from 2018 to get the sequel to this awesome video game. Now back to The Last of Us though. With the way Abby was introduced in the second game and the way the character was portrayed, like, you have antagonists, you have villains out there like Zod, perfect example. Zod for Man of Steel. He believes he is the good guy. And they portray him in a way to where you can see that point of view. And they try to do the same thing with Abby. And I understand their point of view of having us to feel sympathy for her because of what Joel did in the first game that actually led to consequences of Abby doing what she did to Joel. I understand the route that took there. But the way it came through, and I'm not saying it was the gruesomeness of it, because it is gruesome. And I'm not saying I'm not a fan of that. I like, hey, more gruesome stuff the better if it enhances your story. But with the way that it was portrayed with Abby doing what she did to Joel without proper setup, maybe that's one of the big changes that they're going to do in the TV show. Maybe they're going to still give Joel a whole bunch of time, but they're going to do a back arc story for Abby to where we better understand her, to where we better understand where she came from, what's going on with her, who she's lost during this tough times in this Last of Us world. Maybe that's what's going to happen. And I think that's probably the route that's going to take place. And for us as a viewer, we're going to benefit from that. And then when the ultimate confrontation might happen in season 2, or they play it up to season 3, like, you'll understand where Abby's coming from as a character for what she did to Joel. Like, you'll start to feel her pain. You'll start to feel like her contemplation of things. And then you have the battle royale between Abby and Ellie take suit, in which I will say that's one of the bright spots of The Last of Us Part 2 video game. The confrontations between Abby and Ellie going both ways. When Abby wins the first fight and when Ellie wins the second fight. And so maybe that's the route they go with season 2, where they give Abby a little bit more breathing room. They give her some more gravitas versus just right out the gate, bam, like, who the heck is this person? Like, now I don't like her. And so maybe that's the route they took. Maybe that's the route they take going forward. One last thing, I will close this unique episode of Walking With Me. The one thing I'll close out with when talking about sports, when talking about this coming weekend's Titans versus Browns matchup in Cleveland, I have a score for you. I think this is going to be the game where we put up 31 points. This is going to be the game where we finally put up a 30 burger. I honestly believe that. I believe now that you've got your O-line figured out with the left guard, and I think now going forward, Tannehill's maybe found his groove back. I think the score is going to be 31-24 Tennessee. That is going to be my ultimate prediction. And I think going forward from there, we will see how Cincinnati does. And all eyes are on Cleveland if you're a Titan fan. And so with that, I'll wrap it up. I'll see you guys next week for another episode. And as always, keep kicking it to the king.